Greetings. The title of this lecture is Visualizing Data, Statistical Charts, Graphs, and Tables. And in it, we want to take a look at how do you create effective presentations from data. When I say how, we're talking about the big picture level, not nuts and bolts of computer code. Okay, this is intended for different statistics courses I teach: Math 210, Intro to Prob and Stat, 318, Biostatistics, and even 332, Statistics. So the order of our presentation is going to be some introductory remarks. We'll take a look at some bad graphs and then good ones. And I've got a few exercises that I'll make mention with some resources. Okay, so starting off with the introductory remarks, we want to look at the scripture. Why is it that graphs are so important? Why isn't there a scratch and sniff statistic? Why isn't there a touch and feely statistic? Okay, it has to do with the very way that we were designed by God. Even in the garden, when Eve was tempted, it says when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. Okay? She didn't, oh, it smells so good. No, she saw. Okay? Of the five senses, sight is recognized widely by philosophers and psychologists to be the chief among the five senses. That's by design. And so in statistics, we're simply capturing this element of design by putting things into a visual form. John writes, "All that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world." And he includes in his three-part categorization of sin a visual dimension. When Jesus is asked by his disciples about why he teaches in parables, he quotes a prophecy from Isaiah that says, "You will keep on hearing, but not understand. You will keep on seeing, but not perceive." Of the holistic perception, Jesus goes on to talk about the heart. He includes the ears and the eyes. And so again, we see this chief sense of it. Okay, so you've got that. You may have heard the saying, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." Okay, we don't say a smell is worth 1,000 words, although in some cases one might. But picture is worth 1,000 words. That's the idea that we're getting at here. Okay, so in light of that, what's the purpose of graphs? The purpose of a graph, or a statistical picture, as Jessica Utz calls it, is to enable the viewer to see the data more clearly and concisely. That's really what we're going after. Okay, so in light of that, in your notes, you should have a list here of Jessica Utz's 10 questions to ask of a graph. Okay, the first 5 are key features. Those go to the purpose to see it clearly and concisely. The second 5 are common errors that are made in the creation of graphs. And I don't need to review these in detail right here, but they're out here, they're in your notes, and this kind of gets down to the nub of it. Anything that detracts from seeing the data clearly and concisely is what Edward Tufte calls chart junk. And it should be removed because it's violating the purpose of the graph. Now we're going to use that as a criteria as we go in to look at good and bad graphs. Okay, if we were in a classroom setting, I've got some discussion questions. We'll go ahead and move forward. But one leading question that I like to ask is my number 3. Is the list complete or can it be added to? I completely buy Utz's list, but there's one thing that I want to add to it.
So we wondered if you could advise us.
Because we don't know what to do.
How do you know your sister's story is not true?
But Edmund said they'd only been pretending.
Oh, that is a point which certainly needs consideration, very serious consideration. But if you'll excuse my asking the question, does your experience lead you to regard your brother or your sister as the more reliable? I mean, which is the more truthful?
Well, that's just a funny thing, sir. Up to now, I'd have said Lucy every time.
In general, I'd say the same as Peter. But, well, this couldn't be true. A magic country, and a wood, and a fawn.
Well, that is more than I know. But a charge of lying against somebody you have always found truthful is a very serious thing indeed.
We were afraid it mightn't even be lying.
We thought there must be something wrong with her.
Madness, you mean? Oh, you make your minds easy about that. One only has to look at her and talk to her to know that she is not mad.
But then...
Oh, logic. Why don't they teach logic at these schools? There are only 3 possibilities. Either your sister is 1, telling lies, or 2, she is mad, or 3, she is telling the truth. 1, you say that your sister never lies. 2, it is perfectly obvious she is not mad. So for the moment, until any further evidence turns up, we must assume 3. She is telling the truth.
I hope you enjoyed that clip. It goes to a point that I want to make about graphs. To get to it, we're going to use C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia that you just viewed the clip from. And when he was putting together his original radio broadcast on Mere Christianity, people were saying Jesus is a good moral teacher. He's not God, but he's a good moral teacher. And so they wanted to just sort of take the urgency of the biblical claim off the shelf. And so C.S. Lewis used this logic. He said, Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. Okay? So he could either be 1, a liar, 2, a lunatic, or 3, telling the truth. He really was the Son of God. But a good moral teacher would not be able to say they were the Son of God unless they really were. So that's an option that is no longer on the table. Okay, brilliant. Now, that threefold logic is useful in other contexts. So in the Chronicles of Narnia, we saw that Peter and Susan, with respect to their sister Lucy, she was either lying about Narnia, or she'd gone crazy, or she was telling the truth. But there wasn't some other possibility, and therefore, since they didn't believe she was a liar, and the professor said she's not crazy, he said, let's assume she's telling the truth. Now apply that to graphs, okay? When you see an issue, something that just gets your goat or really stands out to you, it's something you hadn't considered or known before, then either it's lying and they've made something incorrect on purpose, or number 2, lunatic, they've just made a mistake. It's a mess up, and you'll see that. Or number 3, you've got something to learn, and there's something new to adapt to your thinking, to adapt to your life. Okay, we can do that with graphs. All right, you can also do that with any statistic, quite frankly, but I want to just put it there. So let's continue. Okay, I want to classify all graphs into simply 4 categories. This also should be in your notes. If you can grasp this, it will be very useful for determining some of these previous things here. Intentional manipulation, is it just a mistake, or do I really have something to learn there? So, first purpose is to show the distribution of the data. How is it distributed? For categorical variables, bar graph is the way to go. For numeric variables, histogram is the way to go. Now, there are some subcategories of bar graphs and histograms, but those are the 2 chiefs. That's what you want if your purpose is to just see the data. That's why it's your initial display. Okay, now, if you have a single variable and you want to just look at its relationship within one category, then if it's categorical, maybe it's a budget and you just have some budget categories, you would use a pie chart. Okay? If it's a numerical variable and you have some additional categorical information, maybe it's heights and you want to look at the height distribution according to hair colors, then multiple box plots is going to do a good job. So you'll box plot each of the different hair colors, those heights. Okay, now if you have two categorical variables, then generally the best thing to do is to just show a contingency table. That's those two-way tables, not a graph. If you want to use a multiple bar graph and you've got same categories, then you can pull that off. A little more complicated, works. R will do it. Excel will do it. That's workable. If you have two variables you want to see the relationship numeric, then a scatter plot is the way to go. Now, the fourth purpose, which is not typically emphasized in introductory courses, but I want to put on the table, is if you're looking at a trend over time, time is not considered an extra variable per se, though you do graph it on the x-axis, but you'll show a line graph. When you measure time, it's a fixed thing, and so you're just taking it as it comes over time. That's why it's not an ordinary explanatory variable in the usual sense of the term. Okay, one could go into a discussion, maybe do some extra stuff there, but I'd like to get into the bad graphs. Okay, first one here, you'll see these in all kinds of newsy items. Which of these two is better? The one on the right is ugly. The one on the left looks better, but it's inaccurate. If you notice here, the impression is this psychology is just dominating percentage of PhDs earned by women as opposed to math, okay? But there's bias in here. If you look at the width here, approximately a width of 3, height of 6, then you're going to get 3 times 6 is 18 area, whereas math, you can see it's about 1 by 2. This is a 9-to-1 versus a 3-to-1. So the area impression triples the true impression, which should just be a 2 to 6. Psychology is 3 times the size of math, not the area impression, which is 9 times. Okay. In this graph, we have Democratic primaries. I believe it was 2000 in New Hampshire. We have Gore and Bradley. Looks like Bradley got spanked. Gore beat him by twice as much. But in reality, we have a cut in the axis. And so there's really only a difference of 5%, 52 to 47. Yeah, Gore beat him, but it wasn't a huge margin. Okay, so always need to watch for the cuts in the axis, and that's just something to put your eyeball by. If you do a graph by hand, put a little marker there. Computer software often doesn't do that. Okay, here's the same information put into a 3D plot, and as you can see, they look close to each other, yeah, but it's heck of hard to read the numbers. And this is the default Excel 3D graph, which is absolute junk. Okay, do not use that. I don't want to see those on your statistics projects, please. Okay, this fails to achieve the goal of presenting the data clearly and concisely. I have to work hard to try to read what those specific numbers are. Okay. Let's see, I've got an item here. Bar graphs without 4 bars are a waste of space. Use a table. This could be summarized in 2 numbers. It's a total waste of space. Okay, and I put never do a 3D bar graph. That's a complete waste. There is room for a 3D graph. That is, if you have 3 dimensions that need to be plotted. If you don't, stick with 2. Okay, this is my absolute favorite graphical distortion taken from Jessica Utts. Okay, this is domestic water production. This came from a UC Davis publication, and we got 1968 to 1992. Is this 1968? I'm not sure. One of the key observations of the graph is, what was the year of the Big Dip? Well, if you start at this year being 70, then that makes this one 80. Although, 78, 79, which you can see the problem. Okay, now how big of a dip was it? No label on the x-axis. Okay, I don't even have a unit. Production, yeah. Okay, the next two graphs are consistent on the x-axis. Here, it's a calamity, and we had a massive drop in whatever year that was. Whereas over here, it's a drop, relatively big, but in absolute terms, not a big deal. So not having proper labeling is devastating. Okay, it fails to meet the purpose of the graph. Here's a couple pulled off of some news clips. I've got to tell you that I think the bottom one just looks a lot snazzier. It grabs me more. You've got this nice sort of stripy that in the background grabs my attention. You got this red line. Ooh, what's going on? But as I look at it, there's no y-axis. There's no x-axis. Okay? They're directing me to these 3 points, which they're defining for me. They're telling me what to think. Whereas the top one here, you have a very easily readable x-axis and y-axis. There is a cut in it. We can clearly see it. And we can look at that and read it for ourselves. Not quite as snazzy, but man, it's a lot more clear. There's a lot more information I can obtain from it. Okay, this is another classic from Jessica Utts. If you look at this thing, you could spend a lot of time on it. We have office-based non-salary physicians, okay? So that's the gray bars. Numbers are given, which helps make things clear. And then we have male professional technical and kindred workers, okay? Some kind of other industry here. And those are the black. You have a little distortion with the head. I'm not too concerned about that. They have the numbers there. But the thing is, they're trying to just fancy this thing up. And first of all, bars are not appropriate for time series data. You should use a line. This is a time series plot, or a line graph, as I said. So 2 lines would much more clearly get at this. And then you'll see these things, which I have asked students over the years what they think they are, and I have received teeth, kidney beans, balloons, nursing face masks, and other possible interpretations of this graphic. Frankly, no one knows what it is. It's complete chart junk. Now for the last distortion, and this one is key, and it does not help their case. I think it's done ignorantly. Look at the axis. 39 to 47 is 8 years. 47 to 51 is 4 years. And then I have a 4-year, and then I move to an 8-year, then a 2-year. Inconsistent labeling on the axis. Am I faulting them for not having the information? No. Sometimes it may be hard to get, but still you should use it correctly. I'm showing in the next slide here a fix to this. Here's the original graphic. And I simply did a conventional line plot. Have we lost any information? No. In fact, if anything, their case looks at least as good. But you'll notice this spread right here. That's the message that they're trying to get at, is the spread. When I'm looking at this graph, the chart junk is overwhelming and the image is obscured. By the way, as I'm showing graphs created in R, for those of you with the PowerPoint, those scripts are all in the notes portion of the PowerPoint. Let's take a look at some good graphs. Okay, here is a histogram, and I've added a little bit to R's default histogram So you can see the default in the background. I went ahead and put some lines here on the y-axis so I can very clearly read it off. I gave a nice x and y-axis label with a title, and then I even included a source, okay, as one of the key items so we can look at the quality of the source here. Okay, that's a very high quality graphic. It gets the job done. It's not fancy, but it clearly communicates the information, and that's what we're after. Here's heights again by hair color. So I've got clearly labeled axes, and then I went ahead and colored each of these box plots. I tried to use a color that was close to the hair colors, you know, putting a little bit of an artistic flair on there, but a practical sense. And again, the message is very clear. All the heights are about the same, except those brown-haired folks do look a little higher. Is it statistically significant? Does it reflect something in the population? That's a question we'll have to get to later in the course. But just breaking it down in a nice graph can at least lead to that question that we might be interested in looking at. Okay, here's one to compare two numeric variables together. Again, I've got the height and then weight. You'll notice I just added on here a correlation coefficient in a different color. Looks good. And we've got the points and the regression line through that scatter plot. Everything is crisply coming. We clearly see a trend, although there's definite variation. How much is there? Boom, we're showing correlation coefficient. So much information, boom, right at our fingertips. Okay. Next up is a classic and very powerful display. In case you don't remember, Florence Nightingale was a nurse, Crimean War, late 1800s. This is British now. And when she got out there, she came to the shocking realization that many troops were dying not from battle and not from like the severe wounds out on the battle, but actually they were dying from getting back to the tent, getting sick, getting infections, poor medical and sanitary conditions. She petitioned Parliament for change. Nothing happened. She finally produced these two graphics in a paper, and this shows the months before they saw her data presentation and went, wow, this is something we need to deal with. And this is what happened afterwards. We can see it's not a conventional graph that we use today. I'll show you how we might display it today. But you can see the disease here. And as the months go forward, here is, let's see, 1855, April. And then we go May, June, July, and you can see as the months go by, the deaths by disease are just dropping dramatically. Okay, here's the two side by side. And if we were to put it into a line plot, which is what we would do today, then you can see that once things got going, this blue is the disease. After the Sanitary Commission, boom, we've got a nice big drop. And it really shows nicely using our modern technique of a line graph. Okay, nursing majors, Florence Nightingale is one to look up for integration between nursing and statistics. Okay, and she was a Christian on top of that. Okay, another one, Charles Menard. This is the best quality graphic I could get, so I'm just going to interpret here. This guy was with Napoleon on his march on Moscow, and he actually constructed this afterwards. The name Napoleon does not appear on the graphic, okay? But let's go after this. There are 6 different variables, you could say 6 dimensions depicted on this graph. The width here represents 422,000 troops. And so as we go over time, as it thins out, troops are dying. We have date going across here. We have temperature going across here, it's getting colder as time goes on. We have direction. The light color is moving on the graph. This is east, and then the black is moving west. Okay, so by the time that we reach Moscow, there's only 100,000 troops left. It's the dead of winter. They cannot even enter. It's locked, barred, and they are antagonistic, and the troops don't have it in them to fight. They turn around. By the time they get back, there's 10,000 left. One graph tells an entire story.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew. So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up, Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa. And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner. Well, what you have seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
I trust you enjoyed Rosling's 2,000 Years of History in 4 minutes. That was a scatter plot through time. Here's a link to the video, and that was taken from the video, The Joy of Statistics, that we watch at the beginning of my stats courses. Okay, now won't do these exercises, but I just have a few things to practice on selecting which is the best graph and what kind of graphs could you make from some given variables to kind of exercise things. Particularly for my biostatistics and my 332 students, I want to just hit as an appendix what a cumulative distribution is. So if you have a regular probability distribution, this is a triple coin toss, the number of heads that can occur on the flip of 3 coins. You could get 0, 1, 2, 3 heads, and that's going to graph as 12.5%, 37.5%, 37.5%, and 12.5%. This is kind of a simple little histogram display. The cumulative distribution means you successively add probabilities. So cumulatively, the probability of getting 0 or less is 12.5%. That's here. The probability of getting 1 or less is the 1 plus the 0. So that's the 12.5 plus the 37.5, which goes here at 50%. Okay, now moving to the 2, 2 or less, well, that's going to be the accumulation of 2, 1, and 0, 87.5%, which is here. Okay, then probability of getting 3 heads or less, of course, is 1, and that is it. Okay, here's a graph depicting a cumulative distribution function in practice, and you can see it there. The common case that we see it in all my classes, and very typically, is in the normal curve table. That's a cumulative distribution table. It gives you all of the accumulated probability up to the percentile that you are looking at. Okay, so for example, a z-score of 0 is 50%, so that's 0.5. A z-score of 1 is about 0.84, 84th percentile, and so on and so forth. Okay, last slide here is just some additional resources that you might take a look at. Edward Tufte is clearly the leading authority on graphs. His website's pretty amazing. He's got some awesome books. If you're really into R graphs and you want to go deep, this website here will show you some very, very detailed graphs. It'll show you the image plus the script used to create it. So you can do that if you want to go deep. Here's a website that's just got good and bad graph examples, and then a classic book, Darrell Huff's How to Lie with Statistics. It's in our library. Tongue-in-cheek, what he's getting at there is how to see the manipulation that goes on in the use of statistical displays. And that covers visualizing data using charts, graphs,